The late Johnny Carson has gone down as the most iconic talk show host in the history of television, and co-host Ed McMahon claimed there were many things Johnny did that his less charming peers couldn't have gotten away with. Join Factsverse as we take a look at several times Johnny Carson went way too far with his female guests. Johnny Carson allegedly had a license to be lewd. According to friend and co-host Ed McMahon, the late and beloved talk show host Johnny Carson had a special license for being lewd with his female guest stars that was granted to him on account of his disarming Midwestern charm. Ed McMahon shared he thought his former boss did and said things during his tenure as host of The Tonight Show that his less charming contemporaries wouldn't have gotten away with, especially with such high ratings. But as Ed put it, Johnny knew exactly where to draw the line, so his disarming demeanor wouldn't be enough to keep his guests from feeling uncomfortable. Some of the many guests Johnny nearly crossed the line with include Dolly Parton, Lucille, Betty White, Sophia, Loren, Zsa Zsa Gabor, and Madonna. Each time, the talk show host thankfully managed to keep audiences and his guest on his side by curtailing his behavior at just the right moment. Johnny Carson and Dolly Parton. Johnny Carson's infamously lewd interview with country music legend Dolly Parton happened in 1977, when the country singer was still a relatively new sensation. Johnny, of course, had been holding his seat as host of The Tonight Show for well over a decade at that point. As soon as Dolly came on set and sat down beside Johnny, it became instantly apparent that the host was interested in much more than the singer's music. Dolly has always been known for being just as much a sex symbol as country star, and the icon has never been a stranger to the male gaze. Because of this, Dolly likely wasn't too offended by what Johnny did and said during her first interview on The Tonight Show. The host continued to bring the interview into adult territory. Eventually, he proclaimed to Dolly, seemingly in earnest, that he would be willing to pay an entire year's salary to see her naked bosom. Dolly simply laughed the joke off at the time, but later she revisited the experience by making a joke of her own, claiming she would pay to take a shower with Johnny. While audiences may balk at Johnny's behavior in that interview with Dolly nowadays, it doesn't seem as if the country singer was very offended by his behavior. In fact, it seems Johnny and Dolly maintained an amicable professional relationship following that initial interview. Johnny Carson shocked his old friend Lucille. Several years before the Dolly Parton interview, Johnny performed an interview with television legend Lucille that was arguably even more problematic. They had been friends for many years before this interview and remained friends afterwards, so audiences both then and now have understandably taken the interaction with a grain of salt. The interview was going well until Lucille asked Johnny if there was anything the talk show host was curious about regarding her that he didn't already know. Johnny replied by asking Lucille how old she'd been when she lost her virginity. Lucille gave a seemingly authentic look of shock, and Johnny laughed and claimed that the shocked reaction she gave was exactly what he'd been looking for. Betty White and Johnny Carson. Johnny was also a good friend of Betty White's. Not only would he often have her on The Tonight Show as a guest, but he would frequently bring her on to perform sketches alongside him. These sketches, including one where the pair played Adam and Eve, for some reason always seemed to involve both comedic actors being naked. Because of this, Betty White would go on to joke that Johnny simply called her up every time he wanted to take his clothes off. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. And stick around for more inappropriate things Johnny Carson did to his female guests. Johnny made Sophia Loren turn red. In 1979, Johnny had the good fortune of hosting Italian actress and venerated sex symbol Sophia Loren as a guest. Of course, Johnny wasn't going to go the whole interview without shooting his shot with the beloved female icon, and he did so in classic Johnny fashion. Towards the beginning of her appearance, which otherwise consisted of another run-of-the-mill interview, Johnny Carson pulled out a box and gifted it to the actress. When she opened it, it was revealed to be a red garter. Johnny then claimed he heard Sophia considered the color red lucky, so he wanted her to have a red article of clothing with her during the interview. Why he chose a garter is anyone's guess. Sophia seemed relatively unfazed by being granted this sexually charged item of clothing and returned the favor by offering the talk show host a small red bag of salt she kept on her for the exact same purposes. Apparently, Johnny's intuition had been right, and his gift of the red garter had made it so Sophia no longer needed her lucky red salt bag. Once again, it seems Johnny's charm magically allowed him to interact with a female guest in a way that would have been inappropriate for anyone else. Madonna taught Johnny what a bustier was. By the time pop singer Madonna made her talk show debut in 1987, Johnny was coming towards the end of his 3-decade-long tenure as host of The Tonight Show. According to Madonna, she specifically chose to pop her talk show cherry with Johnny Carson, and she did so in spectacular fashion. When she showed up for her interview, she did so wearing exposed lingerie. Johnny was understandably taken aback, though seemingly in a good way. Over the course of the interview, the talk show host went on to question the singer about her odd choice of clothing. At first, he seemed to think maybe it was a progressive fashion top that she had designed herself, but she explained it was just run-of-the-mill lingerie she had purchased at the store. Johnny asked what the name of the item was, to which the singer replied it was a regular bustier. It took Johnny over 25 years of hosting The Tonight Show to finally learn what a bustier was, and he never forgot the experience. The Zsa Zsa Gabor pussy petting story. Is it true? Besides all these incidents on The Tonight Show that have been documented, Johnny Carson also allegedly had a ribald interaction with Zsa Zsa Gabor that involved a cat the actress brought with her to an interview. According to legend, Zsa Zsa asked Johnny if he wanted to pet her pussy, to which the talk show host replied he'd love to, but there was that cat in the way. The internet seems to love to deny that this interaction ever occurred, but where there's smoke, there's fire. Jane Fonda confronted Johnny about the Zsa Zsa Gabor rumor during an appearance of her own on The Tonight Show, and Johnny claimed he had no memory of such events ever unfolding. But even if the story is untrue, the beloved talk show host certainly said and did plenty of things during his 3-decade tenure that raised some eyebrows. The origin of Johnny's Midwestern charm. Johnny was born in Iowa in 1925 and developed a passion for performing at a young age thanks to mail-in magic kits he collected as a kid. It was while serving in World War II that Johnny began to enjoy making people laugh, entertaining both his peers and higher-ups with jokes. After the war, he moved to New York City in the hopes of becoming a performer. By the late 50s, he'd begun hosting the game show Who Do You Trust? It was while working on this series that Johnny developed his professional relationship with co-host Ed McMahon. Now it's time to hear from you. Which one of these stories was the most shocking to hear about? Let us know in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content. By the way, if you haven't joined Factsverse as a member yet, be sure to look below this video and click the join button. By becoming a paid member of Factsverse, you'll get access to exclusive video content that you won't find anywhere else. This includes some of our more mature content that isn't suitable for public audiences, which includes topics like Hollywood actresses who posed for Playboy and some of the steamiest moments in movie history. Plus, you can enjoy these videos completely ad-free. Our biggest fans will notice they also get badges next to their name when they leave comments on our videos. We pay special attention to comments from our members, and so do other viewers. So if you want exclusive content from Factsverse or inside access to discussions with other community members, click the join button to get started for just $4.99.